Okay, so then just to very briefly introduce Vistaprint, we are an online provider for marketing materials, especially for small businesses. We print business cards, flyers, brochures. We also provide digital products and really try to target small businesses to help them create a company identity. We are based in 15 locations worldwide, have just about 4,000 employees, and serve 70 million customers. We are publicly traded, and we currently localize for 25 websites. And our European marketing headquarters are in Barcelona. So luckily enough, I'm based there as well. And that's what a typical website could look like for Vistaprint. This was during the holiday season, so we also have some consumer products, but it's really all about printing and mainly business cards. So, a global brand, that's really our aspiration, and that's part of my role to make sure that Vistaprint can become a global brand that stands for the same things in the different markets. But why do we want to achieve that? Well, when you look at Forbes' most powerful brands, you see that most of these are really, really global brands. So they are present in various markets, but they share more than just being on this list of most powerful brands. They're actually also well known for doing localization fairly well. So I highlighted a couple of companies from this list. The first of them is BMW. I just wanted to show you some of the localized advertising they're going out with. So if you look at this advertising, some print material for different markets. We got Turkey, Lithuania, and Thailand. And it's very interesting to see how different it is. So for example, Turkey and Thailand both stand for security, but clearly security means something different in Turkey than it means in Thailand. So in Thailand, people may want to know that if they go over a nail or the road is bad, the car can handle that. Whilst in Turkey, it's about more road safety, stay in your lane, how the car interacts with other cars. Whilst in Lithuania, what BMW may want to push is more around being a trusted brand, the traditional brand. So that really shows that even though you have one global product, you need to appeal to consumers in your different markets in a different way. Another example is McDonald's. So everyone knows it. It's the example for globalization. And if you go to a McDonald's restaurant in the UK versus in China versus in Latin America, you probably have a fairly consistent experience, meaning that you know you're in a McDonald's restaurant and there are certain staples on the menu that will be pretty much the same across the globe. But McDonald's is also known for doing localization very well, especially when it comes to their menu. So they may have a Maharaja chicken mac in India, or a Loginator in Germany, or the McCurry pan, again in South India, where it's more common to eat vegetarian meals. Or here we have an artisanal bread in France, or McNoodles for some reason in Austria, or the McArabia in the Middle East. And of course, the Massachusetts McLobster sandwich. So as you can see, McDonald's really goes to great lengths to make sure that there's something on their menu that resonates with the local audience and that makes them feel that this company is also has a local touch, at least. But apart from that, McDonald's stands for more. So if you think about it in a Western context, it usually stands for convenience. It's open after hours, it's in busy places, it's fast, and it's convenient. But in other countries, it stands for something entirely different. So, for example, in India, it's more known as a family restaurant because families are larger and it's an affordable place to take the family out and have a meal together. And in Hong Kong, it's actually a dating restaurant. As you can see here, you can even have engagement parties there. One of the reasons is, so I was told that a few years ago, Hong Kong teenagers didn't really know where to spend the afternoons after school. So they would tend to go to McDonald's restaurants to do their homeworks and also to hang out, just to not be on the street. So it quickly turned into a dating restaurant, and it's okay to have your engagement party there even. So also a global company can also appeal to very different use cases depending on the market, and it's important to take that into consideration. But why do companies localize? I picked up the reasons why we at Vistaprint localize. I'm sure some of them are similar to your companies, but there will be probably a lot more. This is by no means an exclusive list. So one of the reasons why we localize is the competition. We are a global company, but we do compete on a local level. So we don't have a lot of competitors who are equally global as we are, but there are a lot of local competitors. So we need to convey to our customers that we are a global company, that we know what their business is about, and that we know our customers, and that we have to do on a local level. We cannot go in there as the print leader or the big corporation, because people don't really care about that so much. They want a printer they can relate to, and they feel that they can get what they expect. Another reason is what I call the myth of the global consumer. So especially in the 80s and in the 90s, as many brands went global, there were assumptions there that consumer needs would also converge and become, and there would be a global consumer. However, in recent years, this theory has been disputed quite a bit. So the assumption is that as income levels increase, people actually use the extra income to even manifest the differences in culture, so to even be more different than they may have been before. So there's a very well-known scholar, Marieke de Moysch, which some of you may know, and she has written extensively about that, and really made a point to say that technologies really enhance people's activities. They don't make them the same. And that when companies assume it, they really miss out on the big appeal of their products to the consumer. I want to give you an example of that. So the icebox, when it was invented and when it finally became affordable for normal households to have a freezer in the house, the assumption was that especially in Southern Europe, people would go for it because those are the hot countries. They didn't really have this opportunity before, so that especially there, people would start to freeze their food. But what they soon realized was that it actually was the other way around. The freezer sold especially well in the countries that were already cold, that already had other ways of keeping food cold, maybe cold conservatories or something like that. And the reason is because those countries already had it as part of their culture to keep food cold. So the freezer technology just enhanced this culture. It didn't make Spaniards who never had it as part of their culture suddenly freeze their food. Naturally now, most people have a freezer, but initially when the freezer became affordable, the early take was in the northern countries, Scandinavia, Germany, and so on. And even with dairy products, that can still be seen today, that in the southern Europe where dairy products would go off very quickly before we had the ability to keep them cool in fridges and freezers, dairy consume is much lower than in the Nordic countries, where it was much easier to keep milk and dairy products fresh for a few days. So again, an example how consumer behavior, just technologies enhance it, but they rarely make consumers behave in a completely different way that is not aligned with their culture. Another example I wanted to show you is the Sony Walkman. So as some of you will probably know, it was invented in Japan, and originally, as you can see in this picture, it was invented with 2 sockets for headphones. So that means 2 people were able to listen to music at the same time. And that is because in Japan, listening to music is something you do with somebody together. It's not something you do individually. At least at the time when the Sony Walkman was invented, people listened to music together. But and also the Walkman was originally invented for school children so that they could have some music to listen to after school. But when the Walkman went global and was sold in the United States or in Europe, the inventor or Sony realized that people use it for completely different use cases. So in the United States, a lot of people used it for outdoor activities when they went bike riding or running, and they loved it. And they loved the fact that they could listen to music without everyone else listening to the music. It was something very personal to listen to your music that you like without anyone else knowing what it is. So eventually Sony dropped the second socket because they realized that the majority of consumers really use the Walkman for something entirely different to what it was initially intended for. So generally, and that I took from Geert Hofstede from one of his books, you can say that localization, it depends really also what products you have. So it's important for anything that is related to culture, something like food or travel, cosmetics, anything that's really personal and important to people. Something a little bit more standardized are things like financial products, technologies, B2B. These things are fairly standardized across the globe or across many markets, and therefore they may not need as much localization as food or travel. Now, there are some challenges and that I want to talk about. These are challenges that we experience, but I think they are fairly common also in other companies. So when you decide to localize, some of the challenges are definitely costs. It costs money to localize, you need extra resources, and especially when you have a lower volume, it costs you a lot. So if you have millions of words to translate, you can make the economies of scale work, but if you just have a few thousand words a week, then it can actually become very costly. Another challenge is quality. How can you ensure quality is maintained throughout all your languages? So that also is a challenge for the brand management, because it's hard to know whether everything has been translated consistently, the tone of voice is similar for the different countries, and how do you know as a central marketing team that the marketing messages that you send out across the globe really say what they're supposed to say or what you intended them to say. So in a way, you need to yield control and accept that or trust in the experts that you will hire to do this job for you. Naturally, another challenge is time. At Vistaprint, and I think many technology companies, it's the same, we work with website releases. So new products are launched during certain releases, or websites are being updated, and people work around the clock to make these deadlines. It's already tight. So if you then introduce a translation process on top of it, it's getting even tighter. It's very difficult to make sure that the quality is right, or maybe you need to accept that you launch a product in one market first and in the other markets later to allow more time for localization. But you need to make these trade-offs. And for some technology companies, say like Apple, it's not really an option. Usually the consumer interest is so high in their products that they cannot just go live in English and then wait another 3 weeks until it's localized into the other languages. So it's important to integrate the localization process right in the beginning, but it's hard. All the timelines are already tough, like very tight and tough. So then to introduce extra time for translation is difficult. It's definitely a challenge. Another challenge that we see is what I call ethnocentrism. So that means that the marketing teams that come up with the campaigns are usually, since we have a centralized marketing team, from the same country. And there is a tendency to assume that everyone, every consumer values the same things, which makes the campaign sometimes very challenging to localize. And I'll give a couple of examples in a moment. Another challenge is knowledge gaps. So if you ask marketing teams to come up with global campaigns, of course, not everyone can know every country that this campaign is going out to. It would also be a lot to ask. But one of the challenges we see is that people make wrong assumptions. They use the little knowledge they may have of a market as representative, or they may focus on similarities without considering the differences. And ultimately, this can weaken the campaign or the marketing message, or can make the localization even more challenging. So one example I wanted to give you is, for example, the value of individuality and freedom. And if you look at advertising in the West, you see it a lot. Maybe it's somebody drinking a beer somewhere, and it's about freedom and enjoying one's solitude, or it could be about somebody saying express yourself or celebrate your uniqueness. There's only one you. All these advertisements that go about being unique. And it's often assumed that everyone feels that way. Everyone wants to stand out. Everyone wants to show the world that they are unique. But it's actually a wrong assumption. This is a Japanese saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And while it may certainly not be that strict anymore, it's certainly true that in other countries, for example Japan, it may be desirable to be part of a group and not to stick out, but be part of a collective and to feel that connection with the group. And it's not so much about being unique. Actually, it's not desired. So that's a typical example where marketing campaigns make localization very challenging, especially from a cultural point of view. If you want these ads to work globally, you need to consider it, and you need to find new ways to market for those countries. And another example I wanted to give you came from Logo. I took it from this book called The Culture Code, and it was about Lego introduced a new box system where kids could put together a helicopter like this, or a car. It was definitely a little bit more complex. So they added an instruction sheet on how to put together the Lego box. But they realized that while it went quite well in Germany, sales-wise, in the US, sales didn't go so well. They were stagnating. They couldn't explain to themselves why. So they did some focus groups and watched kids interact with the Lego box, so take the Lego out of the box, and just looked at what the kids would do. And they realized that while the German kids took out the Lego and took the instruction sheet and read it and built the Lego according to the construction sheet, the kids in America didn't do that. They just threw out the instruction sheet and just tried to put it together themselves. And for that, the Lego was way too complex. So they realized that in that case, the German kids managed to put the Lego box together the way it was supposed to be, and it was a success. It looked beautiful. They didn't want to destroy it, so they kept it in a shelf and asked their mom to buy them a new box. Whilst in the US, the success was never there, so eventually the kids just kept on playing with the same stones, or it just landed in the corner out of frustration. So again, this is a cultural impact that has an influence on consumer behavior. So what does it have to do with translation teams? One of the things that we can help with is with language assumptions. So especially in my role, when I started at Vistaprint, I often heard marketing managers say, well, I don't think we need to translate this. People in the Scandinavia, they all speak English, or people in the Netherlands all speak English. So it's not really necessary, especially when time gets tight. People like to cut corners and may want to tell themselves that it's not really necessary. However, when you look at the European Union's report on the Europeans and their languages, that's actually what the report is called. This is actually just an assumption. So 46% of Europeans cannot hold a conversation in a second language. And below you see some of the percentages for example, the UK or Ireland. And it is also depends who your target audience is. So if you target students fresh out of university, then yeah, their English level may be quite good because they will have used it at school and university. But if the target audience are retired persons, then that may not work. Then there the percentage will be a lot lower. So it's equal or similar with blue-collar workers versus white-collar workers. The English level or second language level among blue-collar workers is not as high, and the same with internet usage. So if the more people use the internet, the better their English or their second language level can expect it to be. That means that we really need to also look at your target audience to make sure if the language assumption holds true. Because when you see, okay, 51% of the UK population doesn't speak a second or speaks a second language, then the question is, well, but where do those 51% come from? That's just an average. And we may target a consumer group that is in one of those buckets where the second language performance is very, very low. So this is there are some questions that need to be considered, and that's something that our team already helps with. And here is an example of a very well localized Coca-Cola website for China. I added the source underneath, and you can just have a look at the different elements that were specifically changed or that were highlighted as having been changed to make this website stand out better for Chinese consumer. So for example, there are pictures of a family or group of friends, because that's important to be part of a group in China. Or again, the Coca-Cola brands are presented as a family. You have Sprite, you have Fanta, and so on. And it's almost like Coca-Cola is also part of a family, which is, again, very appealing from a brand perspective. Also, the whole website is red, which goes very well with the Coca-Cola brand, but also red is a color of prosperity in China. And there are quite a few little tricks here, how a website has been specifically changed to target another market. Another example of localization is very logically probably wouldn't expect it. We're kind of used to it now, but when you think about global news, it sounds like inherently that doesn't need to be localized because it's global news, but it's quite the opposite. If you just look at CNN, it has so many sub-channels for Chile, for Turkey, Spanish, even in Germany and in Belgium. So even there, a product that inherently should be global, companies still prefer to localize them to really make them attractive to the consumer market at hand. So all this leads me to the subject of culture advertising, and ideally without a price tag. So this is really where an in-house translation team can add extra value apart from the translations that they will do. But I feel that especially in cultural advertising, there's a lot more expertise that can be provided by an in-house translation team. Firstly, it's about cultural awareness, building that cultural awareness. And why is that important? Well, what we do is we see our culture like a GPS. So our organizational culture is quite strong, probably very much influenced by American culture. And it's very difficult to talk about culture out of context. So what we do is we see culture like a GPS meaning that you have different reference points that allow you to compare cultures. So, for example, here we have a culture comparison about Spain. And the different reference points are can be something around how much does this culture want to be an individual, how much does this culture value being part of the collective, or how much does this culture is about success and competition versus inclusion and harmony. So there are different reference points. I will mention a few on the next slide, but this one specifically has been taken by Gert Hofstede, or has been taken from that website, which I can recommend. And it just gives a quick overview to tell you, okay, here we have a culture where the collective is very important, so this campaign may not work, or looking at your own culture and thinking, okay, I'm from the US, or from Australia in this case of the slide. So 90 is the score on individuality, meaning that that's extremely important in Australia. But then when you look at Spain, it's not as important. So then I know as a marketer or as somebody who comes up with creative ideas that when I have an idea about individuality, that it's not going to work in other markets, or that this may be very culture specific to my market. Here are some other reference points that can be made. So also the relationship between man and nature, that's also very common in automobile advertisements. So a lot of Western advertisement is about how a car can master nature, and you see an SUV drive cross country, no hill is too steep, and even through water, and the man is really master of nature. While there are other car ads where it's all about harmony, and maybe it focuses on low emissions or on a really quiet motor that no one hears, that doesn't interrupt nature around you, or some technology that makes the car brake for some wildlife that might jump on the street. So you can see different cultural approaches in advertising quite a lot. And it's also about communication. It's another great reference point. How explicit does advertising have to be? Do you need to put everything in a message, or can you let symbolism speak? Generally, in the Western world, we are quite direct, and we need everything in the message. Whilst in the Eastern world, China, Japan, Korea, for example, you can work with a lot of symbolism. You don't need that great headline. You may just have a nice picture of a product, and that may just speak for itself, depending on the symbolism behind it. Or also the perception of time. There's a saying that I recently read, and it was around Europeans have schedules, Arabs have time. And that's a little bit stereotypical. But it is true that people perceive time very differently. Some people tend to see it as something linear, something that can be scheduled into days and hours and minutes, and others see it as something very cyclical. And that's also how they will react to some communication they may receive from companies. And the collectivism versus individualism I already mentioned. How do people see themselves integrated into groups? So that's where the team comes in. This is our team. And what we do to build cultural awareness a little bit is when for example, we can provide quick briefs like this one. I took the example of Sweden here, and it's not very long even. It depends on whatever project we may be working on. This one was specifically around a website optimization and a certain product that we were about to launch. And we just looked at a specific aspect of Swedish society, and that's equality and how important it is. There used to be a need for 2 incomes because it was very expensive to live in Sweden, still is. And at the same time, Sweden had one of the strongest women's rights movements, which resulted, among other things, in the highest number of working women in the world. But it also means that in Sweden, naturally, household tasks are shared. There's a very generous maternity leave, but it's even more generous if there's also paternity leave that is taken. And it's also not restricted who stays at home, the mom or the dad. It's up to each couple. It's natural to share custody after divorce, and there are gender-neutral daycare centers. So really, Sweden is a lot about the equality, and women and men sort of have an equal standard. But what does that mean? We looked at some advertising that's around just to display how the culture is shown in the advertising. So here, for example, is a Toys R Us ad, and it's a girl playing with a machine gun, rubber type toy, which would be fairly unusual in some societies to put a girl there. Or here, a little boy and a girl playing with a dollhouse. Or even here, little toys that mimic the household chores. So these things are very specific to Sweden or the Scandinavian countries, and it's interesting to know them when you do advertising. Also, on top, we have han and hon, which means he and she, but there's a third word, which basically hen, and that means, well, it's a third person, but you wouldn't know if it's a girl or boy. So increasingly, people tend to move away from categorizing people into gender roles and just trying to be more general. So what does that mean for our advertising? What's that to do with translations? Well, we launched a product called Mummy's Cards. And the idea is that these are cards that moms can use for play dates or to add their children's allergies on it, or when the kid goes to a child birthday party, to have a contact card for the other parents. That was the idea. But for Sweden, knowing what we've just seen, Mummy card wouldn't work because we cannot assume that this is done, that this is exclusively for moms. It would actually be a little bit patronizing to do that. So we changed it into just parents' cards. Or another example we had is this banner. The original text here used to read, "When you're outstanding in your field, make sure you stand out in the crowd." So that's a little bit like the individualism that I spoke about earlier. It's about standing out and being seen by others and highlighting your uniqueness. But after looking into Swedish culture a bit more, we realized that that's not really a strong driver for Swedish customers. They are not so much into competition and success, being the best. That's not as important as spending quality time with the family. So here what our translator suggested is to instead translate it or transcreate it along the lines of let our advertising do the work for you, so you can spend your time with more important things, or you can spend your time with your family, whatever else, but to really take into consideration the culture of the country. Here I have an example of Italy, which, if you've just seen the Swedish example, is very different. So you have quite clear gender roles, and you can also see that in advertising. So for detergent, it's clear it's a mom's or a woman's job. And there's also still a lot of objectification going on in the advertisements. And when we looked at our adverts, we realized that this email that we sent to our Italian customers may have not been ideal, because in Italian society, old people get a lot of respect, and young people are seen as a little bit green behind the ears, so you wouldn't necessarily take business advice from someone who's younger than you. So when we see this gentleman on the image here, he's way too young for our target audience, and should have probably been replaced by someone a lot older, someone who seems like they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, someone who really can represent the value we're trying to show within this email. So what else have we done? We have created what we call cultural style guides. And there we explain to our designers, to our marketing managers, to our copywriters a little bit more about each of our cultures so that they can be aware when they work on international campaigns. So, for example, we created a mood board on bread. What do you think of when you say bread in your culture? And what our designers can do is they can transform that into templates that will be design templates that will be appropriate for a specific locale. So in this example, on the top right corner, you see a baguette, which will be great for France, even for Spain to some degree. But in the bottom left corner, that bread is a lot more Nordic in appearance, could work well for Germany and for Scandinavia. And we want to do this increasingly, that we can target our customers specifically by what resonates with them the most. What we also do is we look at the images around our website and we localize them. The culture style guides help our translators, our designers already to find the right images for locale, but then they come through the translation team and we can either approve them or provide a better example so that when you come to the website, it really looks like it is a Swedish site or an Italian one. Or in this case, where you have the Big Ben on the UK side in the calendar on the top and at the bottom right, or a more German-looking city at the bottom left. So one of the questions I was asked to answer is in-house versus outsourced. And despite the presentation just now, which is very much in favor of in-house translation teams, it wouldn't be an objective presentation if I didn't highlight some of the advantages to outsource. So outsourcing allows you to definitely reduce personal costs. You can use people during peak times, and when there's a low volume, you don't have a steady cost, which is great. Also, many companies really need faster turnaround times. They cannot plan ahead, and when the job comes, it just needs to be dealt with in whatever time they have. They cannot stretch it out, they cannot negotiate. So, and outsourcing to LSPs is definitely worth your while because you can have as many freelancers working on your job as necessary. It's also an advantage in the technology area. LSPs, language service providers, can provide modern technology. You don't need to invest in it. They can to create efficiency across your translation projects. And of course, they can do, most LSPs work together with copywriters, with desktop publishers, graphic designers, and so on. So there is an opportunity or the ability to outsource an entire project and get the finished product back rather than having to employ lots of different people to do the job in-house. And it can sometimes be difficult to recruit in-house talent in one location. I guess we're quite lucky in Barcelona. It is so central and it's also such a nice city that we haven't struggled with recruiting translators, but I can see how that can be an issue depending on which location you're based at. And of course, most LSPs do provide expert knowledge and best practices, so they can really help making the process more efficient. So therefore, I would say that having an in-house team, I personally believe in it. I think it's great, but it also fits our needs right now. And I cannot say that in 2 or 3 years' time, when our volumes increase, it may no longer fit our needs, and we need to rethink our strategy. So for different contexts, there will be different solutions that need to be considered. But when you do have an in-house translation team, how can you set them up for success? So here are a few points that I always look out for. Most importantly, it's meaningful reporting lines. I think that's really crucial. And there's a difference, it's quite different at Vistaprint than at most companies when I speak to other localization managers. So I currently report into the brand strategy director, but even before then, I reported into creative director. Many localization managers report into a marketing director or content editor or something along these lines. But I think it's important. I think the creative team is a very good team to be based in because that's where the copywriters are, and that's where the graphic designers are. And it's much more easy to explain to people that translation is a skill just as copywriting and graphic design is, and that skill takes time. So if you allow a copywriter to come up with great copy, then you also need to allow time for a translator to transform that great copy for their locale. So I felt that negotiating was a lot easier being set up in this organic structure. It's important to promote the team internally. There are still so many myths out there about translation, and it's just something you have to accept. And I do a lot of brown bag sessions, lunch sessions, invite myself to team meetings of other teams, just to introduce the team, tell them a little bit about what translation is. And the nice thing is it's super interesting. Most people find it fascinating. So if you can come up with some great examples, then the audience will be yours, and people will remember that there is a translation team that they can rely on internally rather than outsourcing or rather than having someone else do it who may not be fully qualified. And that goes to the next point, that it's important to hire the right talent. I'm a strong believer in translation degrees and people really having the experience in the field, but I know that that's not necessarily the case for everybody, and other people have made great experiences with translators who haven't had a translation degree. But basically, it's just important to really hire the right talent, people who are motivated, people who really want to be translators and who go through extra lengths to research what they're doing and think about the cultural impact and do not just blindly translate whatever it says in the source text. And then the other ones are just very simple, to provide the right tools. That was initially not so easy, but I always say that you wouldn't make a graphic designer work on Microsoft Paint. So why would you have a translator work in Excel or Word? That's really not conducive to any productive work. And translation tools are so much cheaper than Adobe or any other well-known tools. So there should be a good case to get the right tools and to create efficiencies there. And then to align the processes, as I mentioned, we work to very tight deadlines, and often translation is the last step. So processes can help to make sure that not everybody eats into our time, or that we get forgotten, that we don't get the translation until 24 hours before it needs to go live, and so on. So processes can really support it. And finally, to follow your vision. Vision is important. When I started at Vistaprint, I started as a translation manager, and then it evolved and we became the localization team to put emphasis on the fact that as an in-house team, you do more than just translation. You do localization, you do trans creation, and now we moved up to brand strategy, meaning that we are an integral part into localizing our brand across Europe. So that would be it from my side.
Thank you very much, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, my name is Andrew Lawless and I'm the president of Rockend Training and Consulting. At Localisation World in Dublin, I will be organizing the Good People Fair. Good People is a new event and it's all about good people. So if you want to hire good people, you want to work with a team of good people, or you just want to meet with good people, Good People is the place to be in Dublin this year. Good People is a job fair where you can meet potential employers or just meet people like yourself and be in company of good professionals that you would like to connect with further on in your career. We also offer workshops that allow you to advance your career, look at your CV, look at your online profile and make changes to it so that as you progress in localization, you will be more successful and have the continued opportunity to meet good people in the industry. Good People has a website, it's called goodpeoplefair.com, and you can go there and submit your resume, look at our sponsors, look at who's hiring, and most importantly, look at what's happening at Good People Fair so that you don't miss your workshop or you don't miss the opportunity to meet the good people that you would like to meet in Dublin.